Hey everyone, and welcome back. We always talk about diving deep, and today's really a deep dive.
Oh, yeah, we're going in.
We're tackling this book, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing.
Hmm.
Have you heard of this one?
Yes, absolutely. It's a classic.
I feel like this has been on my list forever,
Yeah.
and I've been so intimidated because
Yeah, this is dense.
it feels very important and also maybe a little bit like, are they marketing BS?
Well, that's the thing. The authors, Ries and Jack Trout, they basically say, look, forget all the fluff, forget the jargon.
Mm-hmm.
There are these fundamental laws, like uh, physics almost,
Right.
that govern how markets actually work.
So it's less about the creativity, the whimsy,
Wow.
and more about the underlying...
They would say it's about the strategy.
Okay.
Like understanding these laws,
Mm-hmm.
that's what lets you be creative effectively.
Got it. So are we talking like actual laws? Like if you break them, you get a marketing ticket?
Not quite a ticket, but they'd argue you pay the price in the marketplace.
Okay, so high stakes then.
Absolutely.
So 22 laws, that's a lot to unpack.
Right?
We're not going to cover all of them today.
Right.
But we did pick out,
The juiciest.
oh yeah, the ones that really make you rethink things.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with this?
Well, they start right off the bat with what they call the law of leadership.
Okay, leadership. Does this mean every marketer needs to channel their inner Tony Robbins?
Not exactly. This law is less about your personality
Right.
and much more about being first.
First in what sense?
You're into a category. Think about it. First man on the moon.
Neil Armstrong.
Exactly. But who was second? See, most people don't remember.
It's true. I have no idea.
Exactly. And that's the point they're making. Being first, even if your product isn't radically better, it gives you this huge advantage in the mind of the consumer.
It's like you become the default,
You
right?
become what people think of when they think of that thing. Like what pops into your head when I say copier?
Xerox.
Exactly. Even though there are tons of copier brands, right?
It's true. So what if you're not first? Are you just doomed to obscurity?
Not necessarily. That's where the law of the category comes in.
Okay, more laws. Lay it on me.
So I say if you can't be first in a category, then create a new category where you can be first.
Ooh, I like this. It's like, if you're not the best at the game, change the game.
Exactly. Find your own game. They give the example of Heineken. They were the first imported beer in the U.S., right?
Okay, makes sense.
But Anheuser-Busch, they saw an opening. Instead of directly fighting Heineken, they created the category of high-priced domestic with Michelob.
Oh, smart. So they're not competing directly, they're creating their own space.
And it worked. Michelob now actually outsells Heineken.
That's wild. But what about those companies that were technically first, like they invented the thing, but their name isn't the one we remember?
Ah, that's where the law of the mind comes in. This one's all about perception versus reality.
Ooh, this is getting deep.
Because it's not enough to just be first to market. You have to be first in the mind of the consumer.
So are we saying image is more important than the actual product?
To an extent, yeah. Remember the MIT's Altair 8800?
Should I know what that is?
It was technically the first personal computer. But nobody remembers it.
Really? Wow. Why is that?
Because they weren't first in the mind, they were first in a lab somewhere.
So it's not just what you do, it's how people perceive it.
It's about that initial impression. Think of Wilhelm. They were huge with word processors, but when computers took over, that image stuck with them. They couldn't shake it.
So how do you even begin to control that perception?
Focus. That's where the law of focus comes into play.
Okay, so less is more.
In a way, yes. They say you need to own a word in the customer's mind.
Okay, not literally own it, like trademark it, but
Right, own the association. What word pops into your head when I say Volvo?
safety.
Bingo. They have successfully owned that word.
So instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you're laser focused on one thing.
Exactly. You sacrifice being a jack of all trades to become a master of one.
It's like Domino's focusing solely on delivery, even if it meant giving up dine-in.
And that is a perfect example of the law of sacrifice, which we'll get to in a bit. But speaking of owning a word, what happens when two companies want the same word?
Ooh, that's got to be a marketing showdown.
It can be, and that's where the law of exclusivity comes in. It basically says you can't own the same word as your competitor.
It's like Duracell and Energizer, they both want to be long-lasting, but Duracell got there first.
Exactly. No matter how many bunnies they throw at us, that association is tough to break.
So it's not enough to know your customer, you have to know your competition.
And where you both stand in the mind of the consumer. Which leads us to the law of the ladder. Imagine a ladder.
Okay, I'm picturing a ladder.
In the consumer's mind, and brands sit on the rungs.
So the higher up you are, the better.
Well, it's not just about being at the top. It's about knowing your position and using it strategically.
Like Avis was totally fine being number 2. We try harder. Brilliant.
Exactly. They own that second place spot.
Okay, so we've got this ladder in our minds, and brands are duking it out on the rungs. But how many rungs are there?
Now, that is a very good question.
Right.
Because think about it. Our brains can only hold so much information, right?
Right, there's got to be a limit.
Some marketing folks even talk about the rule of 7, meaning most people can only really keep about 7 brands in mind at once for a given thing.
Only 7? That's kind of terrifying when you think about how many brands are out there vying for our attention.
No kidding, which is why this next law is so important. It's called the law of duality.
Okay, duality. 2 things. Right. Am I sensing a theme here?
You got it. They're saying that over time, most markets, they kind of boil down to a 2-horse race.
Like Coke and Pepsi, or Nike and Adidas.
Exactly. Hertz and Avis, McDonald's and Burger King.
It's like there's only room at the top for 2.
Pretty much. And that makes me think, if you're gunning for that second place spot, how do you even approach that? How do you differentiate?
Okay, yeah, if you're not the top dog, what's the play?
The law of the opposite.
Ooh, spicy. Tell me more.
So instead of trying to outdo the leader at their own game, you actually define yourself against them.
Oh, interesting. So you're not trying to be better, you're trying to be different.
Exactly. Remember Listerine. They owned strong, kills germs. So Scope came in with good tasting, total opposite.
So smart. They found that vulnerability, that unmet need, and went for it.
Right. It's like, pick your battles. You don't always have to go head to head. Look at how Apple approached IBM back in the day. They didn't try to be more corporate. They went the other way, the creative rebel.
It's like choosing your lane in a race.
Precisely. Find your lane, own it. But here's the thing. Markets, they're not static. They're constantly changing. Like, think about the categories themselves. They're always shifting, evolving.
That's true. What we even consider a category can change.
Exactly. And that leads us to the law of division.
Division. I'm sensing something splitting apart.
Exactly. They're saying over time, categories divide into smaller and smaller niches.
Okay, so it's like first you have the computer, then you have laptops, desktops, gaming PCs, smartphones, each with its own little world, its own set of rules.
Precisely. And that creates so many opportunities for brands to, to find their niche, to establish themselves.
So instead of trying to be everything to everyone, you become the master of one specific thing.
Right. And this is where it gets tempting to try to be everything to everyone. But that, my friend, is dangerous territory.
Oh no, what's the danger zone?
The law of line extension.
Okay, line extension, like stretching yourself too thin.
They give all these examples of companies putting their brand name on everything and it totally backfiring.
Like what? Give me a for instance.
Would you buy Coca-Cola clothes?
Probably not.
Or A1 poultry sauce?
Nope. It just feels wrong.
Right. It dilutes the brand. This is where that law of sacrifice comes back in. Sometimes saying no is the smartest move.
So hard to do though, right? To say no to those shiny new opportunities.
It is. But it goes back to focus. And that ties into another law, the law of singularity.
Ooh, singularity. Sounds intense.
It's the idea that in any marketing situation, there's usually only one move that will really make a difference.
So you're saying instead of spreading ourselves thin, we need to find that one thing, that one lever that will move the needle.
Exactly. Prioritize, be strategic. Don't try to do everything at once because the market waits for no one.
It's like you can have all the data, all the best analysts, but there's always that element of the unknown.
It's unpredictable. And that's precisely what the next law addresses, the law of unpredictability.
So what are we supposed to do? Just throw our hands up and say, marketing, who knows?
Not quite. It's not about giving up on planning. It's more about recognizing that those long-term plans, they're really just educated guesses.
So be ready to pivot.
Exactly. Stay agile, have a vision, sure, but be ready to adapt because the market throws curveballs, a new competitor, some crazy new technology, a global pandemic.
Never a dull moment.
Right. But, speaking of curveballs, what about when a brand actually hits it big? How do they stay on top? How do they avoid becoming, irrelevant?
Because it seems like so many brands that were once untouchable end up fading away.
And that's where the law of success comes in. And this one's all about staying humble.
Okay. Humility in the face of success. That's a tough one.
Right. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype when things are going well. But they argue that success, it can breed arrogance And arrogance? Well, arrogance leads to downfall.
It's like that saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Exactly. And we've seen it time and time again. Companies get too big, they start believing their own press releases, and they lose touch with what actually matters.
Their customers.
Exactly. They stop listening to the people who got them there in the first place.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really. Stay grounded, stay curious. So we talked about success, but what about failure? It's the flip side of the coin, right? Can't have one without the other.
And you know what? They dedicate a whole law to it, the law of failure. Because it's going to happen. You're going to have flops. You're going to have missteps.
The key is to learn from it, right?
Exactly. Recognize it early, cut your losses, and move on.
It's like that old saying, fail fast and fail often.
As long as you're learning from those failures, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to take risks. Some of the biggest successes come from learning from the biggest mistakes.
It's about being willing to iterate, to course correct. Because clinging to a sinking ship, well, that's never a good look.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point, the law of hype. We live in a world obsessed with hype, with what's new and flashy, but they caution against getting caught up in all of that.
So how do we tell the difference between genuine excitement and just hot air?
That's the million-dollar question. But I think it goes back to substance. Does this product, this service, does it actually deliver on its promises? Is it solving a real problem?
It's about looking beyond the marketing, the branding, and seeing if there's actual value there.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because hype fades, but real value, that's what lasts. And you know what else lasts?
What's that?
Consistency. Long-term thinking. That's what the law of acceleration is all about. It's easy to get caught up in chasing the next big thing, but they argued that real success is built on steady, consistent effort over time.
It's like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race.
Exactly. It's about understanding the long game and playing it strategically.
This has been amazing. But before we get too caught up in the excitement of all these laws, there's one more we need to talk about, and it's a big one.
Oh yeah, the law of resources. Cannot forget this one.
Because you can have the best ideas in the world, the most brilliant marketing strategy, but if you don't have the resources...
You're dead in the water.
Exactly. It takes fuel to make the engine run,
Yeah.
whether it's money, time, people, even just willpower.
It all matters, and knowing how to allocate those resources effectively, that's key. So I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We dove deep into the 22 immutable laws of marketing. We've explored how to be first, how to differentiate, how to stay ahead of the curve, and so much more.
This book, it's like a crash course in strategic thinking, not just for marketing, but for, like, life.
I love that. And that's what's so great about it. It challenges you to think differently about everything.
So if our listeners are anything like me, their heads are probably buzzing with ideas. But if there's one thing we want you to take away from this deep dive, it's this. Don't just consume this information. Go out and apply it. Experiment, take risks, and see what happens.
Yes. And tell us about it. What resonated with you? What are you going to try differently?
We love hearing from you. So until next time, keep those marketing brains firing and keep exploring the world with a curious mind. We'll see you on our next deep dive.